Overthinkers of Reddit, what unlikely scenario actually came true that you were completely prepared for because you are an overthinker? I always carry a small sewing kit whenever I go to a wedding. I have sewed 2 brides into their dresses so far. Not me, but my mother. Apparently at a party where my parents and their friends were playing board games, there was a realization that an hourglass was missing from one of the games they planned on playing. My mother proceeded to reach into her purse and pull out an hourglass she just so happened to bring, on the off chance they didn't have one. However, later in the night when some drinks had been had, someone accidentally slammed a drink down, breaking my mother's hourglass. Without missing a beat, she reached into her purse and pulled out another hourglass. She knew the first one, being glass, might get broken, so she had a backup ready. I didn't actually plan for this. It just worked out. But one day for some reason I put a suction cup in my pocket. I can't exactly remember why. It was from a shower hook that I think broke, and I put it in my pocket hoping to find a replacement or something. Later that day I was standing around with a few friends and one friend was lamenting that his bumper was dented. He showed us and said, "I bet I could pop it right out if I had like a suction cup or something." I wordlessly pulled the suction cup out of my pocket and handed it to him. Everyone definitely thought I was creepy as hell. When my son was still a baby, we had to take an 11-hour flight. As an overthinker, I brought at least 25 diapers for him to go through. He didn't need that many. But the mom sitting close to us was very grateful when she ran out of diapers not even halfway through the flight and I gave her a few. One time, I overthought to concern I had around drive and fire. When the time came that we had a clog, didn't know, and there was a wee burst of flames, I was ducking ready. Edit to add. I cleaned the lint trap religiously. I just had a gut feeling. I bought one of those things from Amazon to clean it and nothing came out, so don't let that fool you. If your drying times are up and there's sometimes a smell, call someone or check every possible location. We found basically Brillo pads of burnt hair inside the heating element. Stay safe, pals. Last edit. Thanks for the award, my first of this kind. You rock, Fuzzabum. I carry scissors in my glove compartment. They came in handy when a kid tightened a skinny zip tie around my 9-year-old's finger at a park. Completely cut off the circulation. Also, the other kid's mom was a nurse, so that was helpful too. Carry scissors and a nurse at all times. Ah crap, I forgot to pack my nurse. I bought and learned to use a Slim Jim, open locked cars. I carry one in my car and have been able to help no less than 10 people who have locked their keys in their car. My brother was visiting me from out of town and he needs something from Target. He called me and said an elderly man had locked his keys in his car and I was able to drive over and help. Also have jumper cables that have helped start a few stranded drivers. Was at one of those trampoline parks with my kid when I look over and see several of the workers attending to an elderly lady sitting on the floor. Turns out she'd taken a shot to the forehead somehow and was bleeding profusely. They were trying to help with paper towels. Well, I'd taken a free local stop the bleed class just in case and since have kept supplies in my truck. Asked if they needed some gauze and a bandage. Went and got it. And brought it back. I told the guy. Now if one piece of gauze fills up, he interrupted. Take it off and put on a new one. I said. No. You put another one over top that one. But leave the bottom one there. He said. Well. You know more than I do. Come over and help. We were able to get her patched up. Went through a stage as a teenager where I thought I was psychic. I know. Stupid. A friend asked me jokingly to make a prediction. I told him to get a flashlight, because tomorrow would be dark. I grabbed one myself when I got home and put it in my purse. No idea why. Just did it. The next day the Eastern Seaboard blackouts happened. He still asks for predictions to this day. I carry a fire extinguisher in my auto. I witnessed a car accident where the engine caught fire. I quickly put it out before it burned the inside of the car. Everyone survived. In college, on occasion, upperclassmen would randomly steal the underclassmen towels from the shower stalls and then lock their room doors, so they had to go to the bar acid. I had the idea to stash a towel in the drop ceiling tiles for just that event. Maybe a week later I became the victim of a towel snatching. However, the upperclassmen were very unhappy to see me strut out with a nice clean towel from my shilling stash. I always keep an unopened deck of cards in my backpack. You never can tell when some hold'em may be needed to pass the time. But when I was at a business conference, the bigwig who was presenting to us was having to wing it with a few things because his luggage had been lost. And he didn't have all of his materials. He had the PowerPoint deck, but he didn't have his props. He started going into explaining how he'd be able to demonstrate a statistical principle he was describing. Only he didn't have the unopened deck of cards he needed. Voila. I was able to produce a shrink-wrapped deck of cards. My boss was also in the same presentation. And he was also impressed that I just happened to have a deck of cards on me. So that's nice. 2. Getting lost in a foreign country. Relying on phone GPS to navigate. Data stops working. Had over-prepared and memorized the map of the downtown area ahead of time. You can download areas on Google Maps beforehand. It's super useful when traveling abroad. I was supposed to get married at the end of May last year. At the beginning of the year. Before any of the pandemic stuff happened. I became obsessed with thinking about all the things that could go wrong and how we would lose our money spent on the event. As a result, I purchased a very high coverage insurance policy for the event. As luck would have it, this type of insurance had no clause that prevented collecting if there was a pandemic. We got all of our money back. Edit. I'm also a germaphobe, and so I had already stockpiled masks, gloves, Lysol wipes and hand sanitizer. I am basically blind without my glasses. And I've always taken a backup pair of glasses when I travel. It went untouched for years, taking up valuable space in my luggage. Lo and behold, one trip to Montreal a few years ago, I just woke up one morning to find my glasses broken. No idea how it happened. Came for the validation, did not disappoint. Will forever bring way too much stuff everywhere just in case. Injuring my dominant hand. As a kid, I had an irrational fear of having it chopped off. I spent all of grade 6 teaching myself to write and do things with my left hand. I made a conscious effort to remain as ambidextrous as possible. As an adult, I broke a few fingers on my dominant hand. But it wasn't a big issue because I could do most things equally with my left hand. Anticlimactic. But it was useful, lol. Edit. Thanks for the rewards, folks. Edit 2. I used to live out of my backpack. And I always thought I'd need to leave town. So I kept just about everything in there you could ever need. Oftentimes I'd end up having to stay somewhere without much notice. And I'd have a change of clothes, face wash, toothbrush, toothpaste, scissors, floss, phone charger, money, snacks, etc. Enough to cover me for at least 2 days without actually needing to go home. The death of a family member. OCD. When overthinking turns into repeatedly mourning for family who are still alive. Because how would I feel if I never get to see them again? I was once driving on the highway behind a car with a couple of kayaks strapped to the roof. My anxious brain kept saying, what if they fall off the car? Final Destination style? I tried to convince myself that it was an irrational fear. But the anxiety got the better of me and I decided to change lanes and make some distance. About 30 seconds later. Cue kayaks. They both slip off the roof and go rolling around the highway. Luckily no one was hurt. But man, that did not help my anxiety at all. Edit to address some comments. 1. I figured I was overthinking since I don't know anyone else who gets nervous or avoids driving behind cars with loads. But I see now that maybe my behavior wasn't so weird. 2. Apparently a lot of you have seen falling kayaks on the highway. I don't think this is the same exact incident as any of the ones you guys have described. 3. From comments about how to properly tie down a kayak. I think these were not properly secured. I don't think they were tied to the bumpers. What would I do if my neighbor's house caught on fire? I said I'd make sure my kids were safe and panic. And then we'd run if the fire got close. My neighbor's house caught on fire and I sat outside and watched it with my kids and panicked. I had a feeling my entire pregnancy that my daughter would be early. She was due the 21st of July and I somehow felt like she would arrive before Father's Day. Bought my husband a pink tie to put her footprints on for his first Father's Day gift. Had my hospital bag packed and car seat installed early. Had a boy jump from a bookcase onto my belly while I was teaching pre-K. Which tore an abdominal muscle. Triggered early labor. And my daughter arrived the 9th of June via emergency C-section. No way I could have known. But I prepared. I work in childcare and was working at a center that was so draining. I started applying for new jobs and went on a couple interviews. One time, I had an interview with another daycare and was offered the position. I loved my co-workers and ultimately decided to turn the new position down. However, I had this gut feeling that I couldn't burn any bridges in case shit at my current job hit the fan. So when I turned down the new job, I made up an excuse saying I'd love to take the offer but couldn't because of this reason but would be in the touch sometime in the future. Lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, shit hit the fan at my work. I took a month off and then emailed the job that offered me a position and started 2 weeks later. When I had a tumor removed a couple years ago I kept the surgical blue vomit bag thing they gave me just in case. In my car in case anyone ever got sick while I'm driving. Last winter I was on a third date. Driving on the highway back home with her. And she was feeling like she was going to throw up. Could not find the blue vomit bag. Felt dumb telling her where to look when it was in my center console all along. She ended up ralphing in a grocery bag that luckily didn't break. Overthought and forgot. Mace. A person I worked with was a registered sex offender and he had a thing for me. I told him multiple times that he made me feel uncomfortable and to stay away from me. For some reason I had nightmares about this dude. He was 6.5 feet tall and ducking hideous. Anyways, he said he was going to stop at a store that I stopped at all the time after work. And it was obvious he knew my direction when I left. I pull up to this store and he's already there. Walks up to my car and I just roll down my window and spray this dude. And he dropped a billy club out of his sleeve. Everyone always told me to stop being paranoid and stop thinking he's going to attack me or repay me. That he's been to jail and learned his lesson. Duck that dude. He should have never been let out of prison. For reference, I'm also a 6 foot tall dude who is always prepared for the worst. I keep my gym bag in the car so I have a dry outfit after getting into a water balloon fight with my nephews. Also I carry band-aids, tissues, Benadryl and stamps, which I give out frequently. Kid skinned their knee at the zoo? Got a bee sting? Runny nose? Forget to mail the kids FAFSA or your tax return? I got you. COVID. I worked at a medical uniform and supply store years ago. And they were moving locations. They decided they weren't gonna sell face masks anymore. And were gonna throw boxes of them away. I asked if I could keep them. Just in case. Made my kids rehearse for a fire. We had rope ladders, escape routes and a meeting spot everyone should. The 17th of January 2018 we put it all to the test. I thank God every day that we all made it out because we were prepared. Overthinking and anxiety for the win. Not me overthinking, but one time when my girlfriend and I were going to the gym she packed me 2 spare shirts. I made a joke that it was unnecessary to bring 2 as it's not like I was gonna explosively shitty myself or something and ruin the spare shirt and need a second spare. We laughed it off but brought 2 anyway. After changing from my sweat-soaked shirt to a spare upon walking home a bird shits all down me ruining the shirt I was wearing. I was so thankful she had brought an additional spare. So I now do not question the quantity of what she decides to bring anywhere. As a bartender, I bring to work sugar cubes for champagne cocktails, extra band-aids, Tylenol, a wine opener for crumbling corks, duct tape, a sewing kit with extra buttons, extra staples, a Guinness spoon, silver Sharpie, extra shoelaces. I think that's all the unusual stuff. Within a month at a new job, I've usually handed something to somebody in need and become a very minor legend. Edit. Oh yeah. I had a box of N95 masks in my earthquake kit, cause inhaling concrete dust while digging people out would be bad. So when the pandemic hit, I donated half to frontline healthcare and kept the rest to rotate. Someone broke into my house while I was in the shower finally, so I screamed, "Duck, yeah, I get to use my shower gun." All I did really was charge the dude naked while holding a Glock, but the sheer look of terror on his face was priceless. I'm starting to think that my whole life becomes this scenario. I think so much about how my life could go that I'm kinda drawn to fulfill these scenarios. But it's not like I imagine myself becoming a millionaire or something. So maybe not quite this. But my little sister. Through a long series of events, my parents, who were not foster parents and not looking to adopt, ended up taking care of an infant who was not at all related to us, whose mother had just died. It was only supposed to be for a few weeks until she could be moved to a more permanent placement. As soon as I found out that my parents had agreed to help watch her temporarily, I knew where this was going. And I had all the initial adoption application paperwork printed out before she ever got to our house. Needless to say, my parents were pretty surprised the day they said they were thinking of adopting her. And I handed them a folder of forms and my handwritten notes on how the process worked. For the record, she has legally been my little sister for 7 years now. I carry some of just about everything in my purse. We were at a beach during off-season, and a kid wiped out. I had everything needed to clean and bandage him up. I carried that stuff, renewing when it got old, for almost 20 years before actually needing it. Being diagnosed with an autoimmune disease after researching it thoroughly and knowing I had it. But everyone in my family telling me I was just being a hypochondriac. Was prepared for the diagnosis. Not so much the life with it. But it's getting easier. I always carried an extra juice box, snacks and an extra set of clothes during high school because I was always worried that one of the kids in my school with diabetes might get low and need some sugar for the juice box and snacks, and I might get dirty or my clothes would get ruined. The extra clothes. Well, one day the kid in my class with diabetes did need a sugar. As luck would have it, a few days later a girl in my class was having a really bad wardrobe malfunction and couldn't wait for a new shirt, so my XXL t-shirt acted as both a shirt dress for her. Edit. This blew up while I was working. Thank you everyone for the upvotes. May the world ever be in your favor. All of you. Edit. Riding a motorcycle. I always assume every car around me is going to wildly pull out in front of me or swerve into my lane. Multiple times these assumptions have saved my life. I'm a pretty crazy overthinker and a lot of times it's needless worry. But I feel like sometimes it prepares me for something that does actually happen. My partner tells me I overthink and overbuy groceries because I have an intense fear of not being able to provide for my daughter. When COVID hit and the shops were out of stock of everything, guess who was the one supplying food and toilet paper to said partner? I was in dorms my first year in uni and people always thought it was funny that I locked my door at night. We were all pretty close and I was insinuating people were thieves, untrustworthy. One night I heard someone fiddle with my door and I peeked through the peephole and saw someone I did not recognize. Turned out he got drunk in the nearby bar. Managed to sneak into the building. Who doesn't lock their door at night? A couple years ago, I was taking classes at this tuition academy when I stepped out for a cigarette. Back then, my family didn't know I smoked, so I was slightly apprehensive. There was a shop nearby, and I just took a quick look at some cars parked nearby. I even internally chided myself for being so paranoid. Imagine my surprise when I saw my mom's car. I then saw my mom with my younger brother at a shop nearby, buying some stuff. To my knowledge, that was the only time she ever visited that particular shop. And it was at the exact moment when I decided to smoke a cig. My anxiety bailed me out for once, although my mom did find out about the smoking later. I got stuck in an ice storm 35 miles from home, and because I overthink every scenario, I had stashed in my car a plug and charger, credit card for clothes, motel, restaurant, toiletries and sundries, and cash for the maid and restaurant tips. I don't take anything much into my workplace since we don't have lockers. So I made sure that I had a hidden stash for a worst case scenario commute, and it paid off. COVID-19. It was about January-February of 2020 when I noticed there was a public health announcement in my city saying the only thing you might want to do right now is stock up on essentials, non-perishables and medicines. No one paid any attention to this whatsoever. But I took a day to build up a store in my cabinet and buy extra flour, canned goods, TP, etc. When our first lockdown was announced, there was a frenzy at the stores. Empty shelves and crowds. Damn, did I feel good. I took a day to take care of that shit. Nobody will ever see this, but one day, I bought a toaster. It then didn't work well on one side. So I decided to return it and get another. Except I forgot the return it part. So I left the semi-bad one in my car, thinking, someday, I will need an emergency toaster. 5 years later, at a workplace, I put an English muffin in the ancient toaster in the kitchen, and rather than toasting, it melted. Seriously. Absolutely ruining the toaster. I panicked briefly and then realized I have a spare toaster. Ran out to the car, brought it in, and swapped out the toaster. Nobody ever said a word. Problem solved. Checking if the gas was open in a stove. Every night I would check in the kitchen if the knobs were in place. They would be. One night my brother cooked, he forgot. And before I went to bed I checked and closed it. I learned that the capital of Kazakhstan and largest city was Almaty. But then it changed to Astana, which was since renamed to Nur-Sultan. If the topic of Kazakhstan comes up, I can casually find a way to bring this up and look like a genius with my wealth of knowledge on a very random and specific discussion. That's basically all I know about the matter though, and it's the only reason I know it. I came here expecting crazy stories of people with paranoia and OCD. Growing up I always wondered how bartenders catch people with fake IDs. I looked at the situation from 25 different angles and repeatedly considered how I'd bust someone if I were ever in that situation. Years later I actually tended bar. A young woman showed me her ID and it looked legit. But she did not. I noticed that her birth date was listed in the summer. I was born in October. Without thought I said, "Hey, you're a Libra like me. The first drink is on the house." She was thrilled and gladly agreed that she was a Libra. I took her ID and shouted to the bar full of her friends, "Hey, kids. Everyone here with fake IDs shouldn't use them tonight unless you want them to be seized and be banned from this place." It was the only bar in a 3-town radius. So they didn't want that. I got serious brownie points from my boss and co-workers.